It's been a long time since I was a teenager, a fact that my muscles and bones like to remind me of frequently. Aches and pains aside though, Grapple Dog makes me feel like I'm there all over again, back in secondary school playing my GBA on lunch break. Whilst it may not break any extraordinary new ground, this doesn't stop the game from being an extraordinary experience in and of itself. Grapple Dog's world of Partash is simply stunning to look at. Its chunky visuals and vibrant colours are reminiscent of classic platformers from the Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo era in the best ways possible. Subtle details like birds taking flight or daisies bursting as you run past add life and animation to a world already bursting with character. In this world, you play as Pablo, a lovable yellow dog in suspiciously familiar blue overalls. Pablo befriends a robot called Null and rescues him from the scrap heap, only to discover that Null is this game's big bad. Whoops. Hopelessly optimistic, Pablo decides to right his own wrongs and thus begins a globe-spanning journey to find Null and bring an end to his plans by locating the cosmic gadgets, whatever they are and whatever it is that they do. Look, the story isn't going to be winning a Pulitzer anytime soon, but what's here is fitting for the genre. It builds up the background of the world, sets up the cast of characters, and gives meaning to the gameplay. That all said though, the interactions between the characters are witty and genuinely funny, wholesome and humorous. I'm genuinely curious to know, for example, what the deal with the toaster is, and there were many other moments that had me laughing out loud. It's charming stuff and remarkably nuanced for the genre. Vibrant characters and colourful graphics form the basics of the world of Partash, but the real shining star in the presentation is the outstanding soundtrack by Jazz Mickle. I don't think I've bopped along to any soundtrack as much as I have this one. It's bright and chirpy, it's infectiously groovy and funky, and it's unrepentantly catchy. It reminds me a lot of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and the musical palette used feels very reminiscent of the Sega Mega Drive's YN2612 chip, which just adds that extra retro sparkle to it all. I almost felt bad completing the first world, as I was going to be leaving that track behind, until the next one started up and I became hooked all over again on an entirely new track. Oh, and the boss music. The main levels of gameplay of Grapple Dog are what you'd expect for the genre. As one of the in-game otters puts it, you gotta take a right, keep going right, take another right, past the spikes, keep going right, and then you'll get there. What differentiates Grapple Dog from the mass of 2D indie retro platformers though is the titular grappling hook, which forms a key mechanic in progression and is also just incredibly fun to boot. I've often said that the best platformer games are ones that prioritise player movement, and Grapple Dog does this extraordinarily well. Platforming and general movement feel buttery smooth, tight enough to be precise, but loose enough to still be speedy and fluid. The wall jump, a feature so often roughly tacked onto this kind of game, actually feels really great, and the grapple swinging has this sense of motion to it that I've not felt in a long time in a game. The individual stages are lengthy, but they don't overstay their welcome. They introduce new mechanics at a reasonable pace, like random physics-breaking floating pockets of water, moving grapple points, or the usual conveyor belt. Then they iterate on those ideas and on older ideas. Each stage then gradually builds in intensity, then it ends, giving you room to breathe as you return to the map screen. Checkpoints are numerous enough that death never feels too punishing, but they're far enough apart that the sense of challenge and progression is still there, and some of the secret collectibles are very sneakily hidden, and later on in the game some are downright evil in their placement. This allows a kind of at-your-own-pace approach. You can rush through the stages if you just want to prioritise progression, seeing the next level, hearing the next track, or you can take your time to search out all of the gems and bonus tokens. Oh, and if you find enough fruit, you even get to pet Pedro as a reward for being a good pupper. Once a stage has been beaten, a time trial option unlocks too, and I can imagine speedrunning this game could be a lot of fun. Each world ends with a boss stage, and honestly, I found these to be a little bit hit and miss in their quality. Whilst they're all visually spectacular, and again that boss music is awesome, the first couple felt considerably easier to beat than the stages preceding them. The third boss was awesome, I'll admit, but a later one that I won't spoil felt overly random, frustrating, and ultimately unfair. Bosses are absolutely a staple of the platforming genre, and they've always been hit and miss in games for sure. I'd likely be more upset if they hadn't been included. Now look, none of them were terrible, but it was just disappointing that at the end of each world, the summit of your achievements and the swan song before moving on to the next area was so often anticlimactic for me. Other than this though, Grapple Dog astonished me. It took me right back to the golden age of 2D platformers, to Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario World, to Shantae, Drill Dozer, Mega Man X, and Klonoa. The graphics, the level design, the gameplay. Whilst none of these things are anything unique or stand out on their own, whilst Grapple Dog doesn't do anything particularly groundbreaking to the 2D platformer genre, it doesn't need to. The things that it does do, it does with such charm and such style that it becomes its own unique and delightful experience. Oh, and then the soundtrack. Oh lord, that soundtrack. Ahoy there folks, Captain Benzie here, and thank you for watching this video review right through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and if the game looks like your kind of jam, that you'll give it a go. Now, I was provided with a review code for Grapple Dog, but my captain's code, laid out on my Discord, states that I will never let this get in the way of an honest review. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help, and consider heading over to my Patreon to help support the channel even more. Happy sailing, folks, and see you all next time.